So, at this point during your chess journey, you've reached a point where you are asking yourself questions like, how do I find the best move, and how do I create a plan? Well, the problem is that I cannot sufficiently teach those things because I am not an IM, so I cannot do those things consistently, so I cannot sufficiently teach them. However, what I can teach you is thought processes that can help you find the best moves and plans to go with. So, let's discuss them. So, the first thought process is SWOT, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and then there's a subpart to threats that asks, can I ignore the threat? That is essentially what it is. It is definitely more tactical based. It is very useful for when you're finding tactics, not very useful for when you are planning strategy. The next one is going to be based more on strategy, and it's a lot more useful overall. So let's go over this basic one first. So, black has just played the move knight f6. We're not going to analyze that move. We're going to analyze white's next move. White is not aware at all of this SWOT analysis thing, so he just plays a random move, knight e2. He thinks that it's good because what he's going to try to do is he's going to try to play knight to g3 to f5 to try to control these squares. In reality, it's not really a great plan, but it's also not a great move for a couple of reasons. So let's discuss them. So what are the strengths of this move? Well, the strengths of this move is, well, this isn't even a strength. This is just a weakness, because even if the knight makes it to the square, the bishop is just going to capture. And then once captures, then you have two doubled pawns. Well, this pawn would be here, and then they would be doubled, which creates a weakness that white can attack. It's just not a great plan. So yeah, it's not a solid plan at all. Black could try to play like knight e7 challenge to challenge the knight that's on the square. So yeah, it's just not really a great plan in general. So let's talk about some other strengths. So a strength would be maybe allowing the c pawn to come up here, which could support a d4 pawn push. This knight is actually also supporting the d4 pawn push, so that may be a valid opportunity. An opportunity would be a long-term plan that you have in mind, or maybe some kind of tactic that you are planning yourself. But there's no tactics here, and the plan is definitely a long-term one, because right now you can't do this because then this pawn becomes just too weak. So, yeah, that is why this move is definitely flawed. The few strengths that it has, they're actually not really strengths. Weaknesses, now the queen now no longer defends this knight, so if the bishop comes down here, then if the bishop captures, then the pawn would have to capture, which would ruin white's pawn structure here. And that is why that would be a weakness. Another weakness would be that, let me think, well, the queen could not come to this square. That might be a centralizing move for the queen, but now that square is taken, that might not be such a commanding weakness. But the actual weakness that actually matters here is the fact that the knight has released control of this square. And I might be saying, isn't this square defended by the d3 pawn? Nope, not at all, because this d3 pawn is actually not defending this, because the queen is applying pressure to this bishop. So if knight takes, then this cannot be taken because this hangs. That is how you do it. That's how you find those tactics. Alright. Moving on, I guess we should go over opportunities and threats. So opportunities was this, or wait, no, that's too far. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Threats, there's no threats by black except with this. That's the threat there. Can I ignore this threat? No, not really, because it wins a pawn. Anyways, moving on to the next, whoa, go back. Whoa, go way back. What is this? So what we're supposed to have here is we're supposed to have an e4, e5 opening and then a knight f6 thing. So, as we have been told before, knight f6 is probably the best move for this e4 e5 setup because it attacks, it also develops, and it just defends everything. So you're expecting d6 or knight c6 or knight f6 and you're praying for f6, but instead you get bishop to c5. And now you're thinking, what? What is this outrageousness? Can't I just pick up this pawn? Well, we need to go through a thinking process first just to make sure. So, if we take a look at this thinking process, the first step is to questions to ask yourself. Does my opponent's move contain a threat? Well, not an immediate one. A future move might be queen h4 or queen f6, but those are pretty unsound moves because it's a one-time threat for checkmate that can be very easily defended. Why opponent play this? To do that. What does my opponent's move sound? No, not really. I do not think so. We'll have to do some calculation later. Can we get advantage from it? Perhaps this pawn. So let's move on. Next step, coming up with a plan. Well, since this is the opening, the real plan is to play d4 here. That would be the ultimate goal. And it would be easier to play d4 if this pawn was gone. So getting rid of it would be nice. That would be a type of plan that you would look for. Then you need to make a selection of candidate moves. What are my candidate moves here? d4, knight c3, bishop c4, knight takes. That's probably your best one. Any of those are candidate moves, but by far this one is probably the best. And then you have to make sure this actually works. So let's look at all of the forcing moves that can happen after knight takes. If this, then this, and you're fine. If this, then this, and you're doing just fine. If this, then this, and then this, and then this, and you're fine. If this, then this, and you're fine. Or even this works, despite the check that happens on e4. If this, then this, and you're fine, and you're actually preparing d4. So in conclusion, knight takes e5 is a perfectly fine move. Your opponent plays queen h4, you have already rehearsed how to defend, queen e2. Okay, your opponent realizes that he has played a bad opening to give up a pawn, and he tries to reclaim the pawn back through knight f6. He is converging on the square. So let's go through the thought process again. How am I, or what? I can't talk today. Let's go through the thought process. Questions ask yourself. So, going back to that section, does my opponent's move contain a threat? Yes, the threat is to take this pawn back. Why the opponent play this? To take this pawn back. To also develop a piece, and also they're trying to castle. That'd be a future plan. Is my opponent's move sound? Yes, because it converges. There aren't really any real flaws to it. It's a good move. Can I take an advantage from it? No, not really. I mean, not right now. Not right now. You cannot take actual advantage from it. Coming up with a plan? Well, my plan would probably be to improve an advantage, like my development. My opponent has 3 pieces right now that are sufficiently developed, and I have 1. And I have 1. And this one, I mean, it's kind of developed, but it's not in an ideal place because it's blocking this bishop in. So, yeah, definitely development would probably be a future plan because I'm lacking in it versus black kind of is really good in development. That's the one thing that black has got going, but the problem is that development can be very easily taken away, which is why this position is losing for the engine. So then, let's select some candidate moves. Well, we need to defend this pawn. So, what's a future, what would be a good move here? So, knight c3. This is probably the best candidate move that we have because it defends the pawn, it develops the second knight out, it's also attacking critical squares such as these, and yeah, and that's probably our best move. Another one would be d3, which is okay, but the problem is that it blots in this bishop, because even when the queen moves, this bishop is still going to be nailed in by this weird pawn structure. Let me stop drawing arrows for a second. So, probably our best move is knight to c3. And as you can see by the engine evaluation, we're doing just fine. So, castles. We need to continue on our quest. We need to get this knight out of here, so just without even using the thought process, we can conclude that knight f3 is definitely a solid move here. Yeah. The queen is running out of moves very quickly. The queen does not have access to this square, or this square, or this square, or this square, or that square either. Because do you know what happens if the queen moves back here? What happens? Tell me. Tell me when you know what happens. d4. d4 happens, and it hits the pawn, and it hits the queen. It's a double attack, so the queen has to move, and then you pick up the free bishop. You have to keep your eye out for these things. So, probably your opponent would most likely play queen h5. Yeah, queen h5, because it is pressuring the knight. That's probably why you would play that, and it makes sense. Let's see here. What would be a candidate move here? d4. Yep, just striking back. Honestly, this is the best move because it follows opening principles, and if you've already watched that video, you would know that this move is solid. You can see how now White's position just keeps getting better and better. So bishop back to d7. You can see it's not a great move. Is this any better? This is a little better. Okay. E5. Just keep pushing through. Not a great move, but this pawn chain here is really solid, so that's why I like this move. The knight has very limited squares. Knight here, I guess. The knight is really starting to run out of squares here, unless knight e8 is good. Yeah, knight e8 is not good at all, so this is the only move that he has left. And yeah, this position is just super good. h3. Are you starting to now see how easy this position is to play? Right back here. What would be another good move? d5. Just completely taking control of this center. It's actually not as good of a move as it seems because it can be immediately challenged with c6 or d6. So actually, yeah, that makes sense why it wouldn't be good. How about bishop to e3, just getting that last piece into the game. So it worsens our position only slightly. It doesn't matter that much. Knight f6, queenside castle. Wow. And yeah, I will let you explore the rest. See ya.